Hello, everybody. Welcome to another special edition of the Sports Desk. This time we're going to be talking about 2018, maybe even taking a little peek into next year. But, sports games, it was obviously tons of annual releases that we're very much used to. And let's get right into it. One of the things that I think definitely marked this year was gamers' anger, just their flat-out anger at a lot of these titles. Now, on one side, I think we've got games that, we're used to delivering a lot of modes. Some modes are going to be, they're not going to be for everybody. You'll get into some, you won't get into others. And obviously there's the whole social media megaphone, and certainly that there's always people, who don't like this, don't like that. But this year, it definitely seems to be a characteristic through many of the games, even beloved ones like, NBA 2K, any of the EA stuff. Anything we're talking about, it just seems like there's an anger, a palpable anger in the air from gamers. And is that, do you guys agree with that sentiment?
I think that 2K had more anger last year because of the microtransactions that were so integrated into the career mode at launch, but this year it seemed like it was dialed back some. But yeah, there's still there's always, I feel like, a lot of anger surrounding sports releases, just because whether it's people 5 years ago complaining that there's no field goal nets or referees on the field in Madden, or this year or every year with MLB where the servers aren't working for the first week of launch. It seems like a time-honored tradition with sports games at this point.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's a certain segment of gamer, and it extends beyond sports games. And I'm not saying that all these complaints are invalidated, because there are things we all want these games to be better at certain things, right? That is not the question. But there's this certain, I don't know if it's a forum lurker, or there are people there that are just there to stoke fires of controversies. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you'll see them say I haven't bought this game for 7 years now, and all you guys complaining about this totally justifies that. And I'm why are you even here if you haven't played the game for 7 years? Haven't you moved on with your life? I don't know. There's just that element on top of everything, all the discourse that's happening, and those are the posts that always rise to the top. And it just really gets hard to have a real honest look at what does the community really think, because the loudest voices are always the angriest. Mm-hmm.
We had talked to, or I had talked to one of the producers from NHL 19, talking specifically about the furor that's erupted over the game felt this way in beta. Now they're still sort of struggling to find some tuner sets that now that the game's out in the wild that people like, and people just want to go back to the beta. But my point being is that he had said, well, we're seeing this from hardcore players, and he acknowledged a lot of what the community was saying. But he said, well, when we talk to our casual players, we're just not seeing that. And so they were sort of taking it as maybe they did hit on some good things, because, maybe not everybody is 100% satisfied, or maybe they're trying to dip into both pools. And so I think, to your point, when you talk about what hardcore people on a forum might say, they're never going to cop to anything about the casuals. They're never going to say, yeah, it's fine to go in that direction. But, it brings up that whole thing of, is there a silent majority that is enjoying aspects of these games that just isn't being heard?
I mean, we see that all the time with user reviews. When a game gets review bombed, it's a lot of people are I thought the game was fine. But if you have that mentality, you're not the one that's most driven to go and leave a user review 1 star or whatever. You're not if you think the game's a 7 out of 10, you're not going to go and probably write a user review. Most people are motivated by either absolutely loving that game or absolutely hating it. And unfortunately, it's often absolutely hating it and having something that they want to complain about.
I came up to Kato this last week, and I was like, Kato, which EA game do you think the users have argued is the best EA sports game this year? Because all these games are pretty much the subject of a lot of ire. Madden gets it, FIFA gets it, NHL gets it. And the answer was NBA Live. Well, and the only reason that one isn't completely in the toilet is because it doesn't even have an audience, really.
Yeah.
It's such a small game that's still trying to find its footing.
And if I've been to that subreddit, I've, been to there regularly, just kind of checking in to see what the temperature is. And the temperature, I could see that, there's definitely people who may have, similarly, similar gameplay complaints or whatever, but just the temperature and the tone of it is just different. Maybe they don't, their expectations aren't as high or whatever. But, going to something you had said, Bert's, cutting back to, again, people making threats, people looking for action, people looking for something to do other than just vent on boards, is I always come across that topic of a boycott. I'm not going to buy, I didn't buy it this year and I'm not going to buy it next year. If this anger is anything to go by, do you think that there will be segments of sports gamers who won't be buying next year, and are we going to see it in next year's games?
I mean, these things follow trends. We often see like a game that comes out this year might be paying for the sins of the last one. Mm-hmm. And I was really curious to see like, was that going to hold true with 2K after last year's backlash over like that system has always been there, but it got a little egregious, mm-hmm. and a lot of people complained about it. It became a big topic for the full year. That was not the case for that game. Like that game still is exciting enough that so many people bought it. It was the best selling 2K coming out of the gate that they've ever had. So I don't know where that line is anymore. I feel like the more information we have at our disposal when we're looking at, are people angry, are people happy, like the muddier the future gets. And I'm guessing a lot of the developers kind of feel the same way too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, on their side, just looking at the products as they are, I think some teams, it depends. It sounds like maybe NHL in particular is getting a little slower to address to some of the gameplay problems. It seems like FIFA, I know they just came out, consoles just got a patch recently, which is trying to affect the gameplay, and I think they've been a little bit more proactive in trying to release some patches to address their issues. So, again, things aren't necessarily different from as they were last year, but it's like, I'm curious if, devs are certainly, they have a temperature of some of this anger, but are they going to be able to address some of these things for next year? Not even necessarily for the games that are out, but just even how they're going to get ahead of things for next year.
I have a suggestion. Just look at every other genre basically that has live service environments. They all have playtest servers. So you can, instead of just releasing a patch with your guess of a fix, mm-hmm. to see if it works, you create an environment where people can go in and kick the tires and you can get real-time feedback. And it's not like this line in the sand that you get, games like Overwatch and Rainbow Six and Division and Destiny, all of them have that sort of thing when you're talking about gameplay elements. And I think that would go a long way to alleviating some of these problems.
Well, the problem is a lot of those are PC versions of those games that have those test servers, and I would say the vast majority of the sports gaming population is on console, so it might be a little tricky. But yeah, I'm with you there. There needs to be some way to allow like the most hardcore members of the community who want to take that extra step and set up access to a test server to really, like give it a test run before it goes wide. I think would be a very valuable thing for them.
Yeah. When it comes to features, all bets are off. I mean, you're never going to, maybe one day we'll get to a point where they're more live servicey, where a feature comes out and we know it's incomplete and they continue to work at it and people are okay with that. But I feel like the consumer mindset right now is so focused on, I spent $60 on this on day one and it's a piece of crap. How dare you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the mind change is there yet for that.
What if, just thinking out the top of my head, would you guys want, a pared back feature set for some of these games? I know the sort of the thought of a la carte features is, come by before, but let's say even, falling short of that, even if it was just, more targeted releases or just less features, because some of the feature sets for these modes, just off the top of my head, again, the Be a Pro for NHL hasn't been touched in years. And certainly I love that to be, fully more fleshed out for next year. But some of these things, it's like, if you're not even going to touch this, then, why is it even here, or what's even the point?
I would almost rather them do like a Rainbow Six Siege style release schedule where it's like, all right, you pay $60 for the game this year, you get the set number of content, and then if you want like to update it in following years, you can do that. Like you can pay like, $20, $30, you get the updated roster, you get maybe like some tweaks to the franchise mode, get some tweaks to Be a Pro mode or career mode or whatever, and things like that. But if you don't want to, you can keep playing with the old one. And it's like, and then they do like maybe like a big release like every few years rather than every year. I think that would be kind of the next step in like the way they're kind of approaching these as like service games, and like more and more games are taking that approach. So it's only a matter of time, I think, before sports games at least look at that method of release.
I don't know. So much of it's repeat revenue when you like create. Everybody has to stop with their ultimate team and create a new one from scratch. Like, I can see why there's resistance to adopting that kind of system, but maybe in the long run that will be the way they go. But speaking about like dropping feature sets, no, I don't think they should drop them. You know who services every single element of their game every single year? Visual Concepts with the NBA 2K. They're able to do it every year. There's something for franchise mode people. There's something for the ultimate team style mode people. There's something for the career mode people. It doesn't have to be either or. That's just the stubborn way with which EA approaches its resources. You know what I mean?
So I guess moving on to slightly more positive topic, if we had to give it, or what we want to give out for our, I guess, personal sports games of the year, and this isn't a hard designation, but let's just talk about that. Do you guys have a standout game for this year?
Yeah, I feel like a broken record, but it's NBA 2K.
Yeah, I think 2K is an awesome choice. I think that it's just head and shoulders above most sports games out there, if not every sports game out there. I think that just like the way, like to your point, they address every single mode every year, and they do meaningful updates. My favorite mode in there is career mode, or my career, whatever they call it. I always love playing through like the dumb stories that they put in, and continuing my character after that. I think they did a really good job this year of balancing like, all right, there's a lot of story here, but then like you're just out in the open playing and in the NBA right now. So it's like, after you get through the story stuff, and I think they even gave you an option to skip that this year, didn't they?
You could skip the cutscenes, which a lot of people
like
wanted.
Those Kojima-esque cutscenes where it's just like 20 minutes of nonstop cutscene. Yeah, that got a little ridiculous. But I enjoyed the story overall. I think that the GM and player career modes were really good. Didn't play too much of the other modes, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was in my top 10 of the year for a long time until like the onslaught of fall releases hit. But yeah, my personal would actually be UFC 3. It's not really a secret around the office. I'm a big UFC fan. I thought this was by far the best MMA game that's ever been put out, at least, unless you want to classify like a Street Fighter 2 as an MMA game, which technically it is, but like, as far as like MMA sim game, there's been like 7 or 8 of them that have like gone serious. I would say this is definitely the best one. They made huge improvements to the striking. The career mode was completely revamped. They did really cool like story stuff. I think that they could expand on that more with like a UFC 4, but it's a great step in the right direction for how to take on story mode or career mode. And I think they added modes that like everybody could enjoy. They carried over like the knockout mode, where it's just like you have like a health meter and you just swing your hands and legs like trying to knock the other guy out. Like there's no ground game or anything, but then there's also, for people who really like the ground game element, there's like submissions only. There's all kinds of different modes that let anybody play. You can create your own event, which I think was in UFC 2 anyway, but they carried that through. Like they didn't really take away anything. They just added a bunch of good stuff, and I think the career mode really shines on that. And it gives me hope for what the next one will do, because it's kind of like, this is the conceptual one. Like this is what they want to do. They did a pretty good job with this first attempt with like introducing like kind of story elements into the standard career mode. I think with the next one, it'll, like, if they carry it on, it will really hit it out of the park if they deliver on the promise of 3.
Now, how was the balance in terms of the gameplay and the different kind of fighters? I mean, I don't know if you...
I mean, they have attributes. Like, they have so many different, like, categories. Like, all right, this guy's striking, like, I think it's, like, his striking accuracy with his left hand, his striking accuracy with his right hand, striking power left, striking power right. All right, his ground game, and then within each of those, there are different like levels for their striking. Like, all right, this guy's uppercut, is it a level 1 or a level 4? And like obviously, if it's like different multipliers based on like which level you choose, or like, all right, what type of like sweeps does he have with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What type of takedowns does he have with his wrestling? Like different things like that. Like, and you can level all those up and like also equip different special special strikes with them. So like this guy, rather than giving him like a quick jab, you can equip like a stiff jab, like a power jab.
But you felt all that came through when it came time to the actual gameplay and how you might use a fighter and what areas they were better at and how they went up against other fighters. I mean, did you feel that all kind of came out?
I mean, I think that they did a good job of like, just like any sports game, the better fighter is going to be like the more successful character to choose. But I think that if you have a guy who's really good at submission, just like in real life, he's going to want to get the guy to the ground and try to take him out that way rather than standing and striking with like a superior stand-up fighter. And I think that kind of shines through. Obviously, there's ways they could differentiate them even further, but I think that it's pretty well balanced in that regard.
Cool. Well, for me, fudging it a little bit, if you can include racing, my standout title was F1. I really like the career mode. It's got a great R&D sort of system that you kind of go down and there's rule changes come involved, which also affects how you do your R&D and stuff. And, I actually don't really follow F1 in real life, but, excuse me, I just love, the racing's good. And then that aspect, something that Codemasters has been building towards. And they do it a little different in each of the, the rally game and F1 stuff, but this one was very good. And kind of going off of maybe not one single game, but, expanding it into features and just aspects of this. I mentioned the R&D tree of F1. One of the things I liked about NHL, and specifically this year in terms of just a nice feature, something I liked was the scouting system for the career mode, which, I didn't even necessarily feel like I was always making the best decision, but I did feel that I did have enough information at my fingertips to make that. And so this has been coming for a long time for this particular franchise. And I didn't know if, Bert, it seems like you like that. I don't know if there's other features of other individual games you guys want to point out.
Oh, for sure. Well, I've spent a lot of time with the scouting system. I'm 10 years in right now with a season.
Wow.
And I've mastered it. My prospect system is ridiculously packed. I think I've mastered it, so I'm really curious to see how they tweak it to make it maybe a little more difficult next year. But that was my favorite feature from NHL this year by far. I also was glad that they got rid of just the archetypes for the EA Sports Hockey League, and you actually have characters that you can put. You can grab those badges and kind of change the way the players play. So that was a really nice change. And then one really small one that I just like because it feels real is in NBA 2K in their franchise mode, you have mentors now. So if you have a guy who's, 35 years old, he's been around the block, he's got all types of badges, you can assign him to be a mentor for one of your young players and they'll accelerate their badge growth quicker. And it kind of gives you a reason to have that veteran on the bench, that steadying presence that, can actually help the young guys, which I like that they've gamified a system that in real life you often hear teams talk about needing,
Yeah, that sounds cool. I haven't messed around that much with the NHL scouting stuff. I haven't really played enough NHL this year at all. I really wanted to dive in this year, but it's just too many games. Not to keep harping on UFC, but I really like the way they've just supported that game. Like every month, I feel like we're getting 3 to 4 new fighters, which is awesome. I think there's over 200 fighters now, including even some off the wall choices. There's the 2 characters from Fight Night Champions career mode or story mode. Bruce Lee is in it. You can play as the president of UFC, Dana White. So it's not just all right, here are the top 20 fighters in a division. It's all right, here's some kind of crazy off the wall stuff as well. I like the way they've supported that. They've also kept up the live events section of the game, which is awesome, which lets you kind of view each fight card and you make your picks. All right, I think this person's going to win by second round knockout, and you're judged against other people in the world. You can even gain bonuses if you can this is the part I don't like of it, but if you make that result that you're predicting happen in the game, if you can actually take that guy in and do a second round knockout to win the match, you'll get like a bonus, which I never do that, but I just like picking the fights. Like that's something that I do anyway. So it's cool to have that represented in game, and then have like an in-game leaderboard with like your friends, or like a global board. So I think that they've just done a good job of supporting it. They keep those up every single week when a new fight card's announced or when new fights are coming out. And then just the continued like kind of keeping their fingers on the pulse. There's still plenty of fighters they could add that are like noteworthy, but they've done a good job of keeping like, you know, and it's more involved adding a new fighter than it is like, all right, this guy was signed from the practice squad in the NFL. Like we can create a guy that looks like him. Like these guys are so detailed. Like this is the only sports game I think where there's only like 2 guys on a screen at any given time, well, plus the referee. But yeah, there's only like 2 insanely detailed characters on the screen at once. Like everything else has, you know, 11 players on a team or whatever. So they have a lot more detail to their character models. So it's a bit more involved. So like, you know, saying like, all right, they added 4 characters this month, that may not sound impressive in like the grander scheme of like a sports game where there's massive roster updates, but I think that it's a lot more involved for UFC.
Did you like MLB The Show this year?
I did, but it didn't hook me in as much as like the other MLBs have. I would like to play more of that. I really like the career mode in that series, but I just didn't have enough time to kind of sink my teeth into that. I think the gameplay was made well. They continued doing that. They made I think you can do a full season in retro mode now, right? I think that was one of the features.
I believe so.
Sorry, I didn't play very much retro this year. I loved it last year, but it was like, all right, one-off game. So what? But yeah, I would like to see them kind of get their act together with the online servers. I think that was Reiner who reviewed who reviews the show every single year. That was his biggest complaint, is that just like the server stability is garbage at launch, especially. But like even then, like I feel like for like a month or 2 afterwards, I still heard people complaining about like server stability with that game, and it's like they've got to figure that out because like that's what a lot of people play that game for, especially when they go into like Diamond Dynasty mode, their Ultimate Team style. That's what it's called, right? That's Diamond Dynasty is their card collection game. All right, yeah, like that's so online based for a lot of its components.
You know, going to one thing that you guys have both sort of talked about was certainly, you know, story mode. I know EA has just kind of gotten out of their swing of, you know, with Madden and FIFA in terms of, you know, the journey and long shot and whatnot. And I guess looking forward to, you know, the sports games in 2019, you know, while certainly expect there to be a story component woven in a variety of ways into the NBA 2K franchise, in general, are we seeing, is this the end of, quote, the story mode and the cinematics and all this sort of stuff for, you know, whether it be for EA or whether it be a trend overall? Whereas, you know, 3 years ago or something, we were saying, you know, all games are going to have that. You know, maybe UFC has, you know, goes for broke and for the next one. Maybe we see that, you know, other series start to adopt that. I mean, where are we, I guess, in this whole sort of story mode, I guess, you know, timeline or arc?
Well, I feel like career mode and story mode can be the same thing, or they can be different. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and I'm talking mainly keeping them separate. That has been, you know, some, you know, again, mainly the EA stuff. That's been their approach to it.
I think it's been proven that is not that compelling of a way to do it. You see how 2K uses it to hook you into the story and get you invested in your character, and then you're unleashed into the NBA or the street mode, and NBA Live is kind of taking more of that approach. Their story's super cheesy. It's really rudimentary. It's not that developed, but they're at least like trying to create a long play angle to it. Whereas FIFA and Madden, you know, like you're just watching a movie basically with no input on how your characters develop. It's not interesting. You know, even though like I think they did some good jobs with the way that they filmed those, and I like some of the characters in them. It's just I'm not attached to them nearly as much as I would be as if I was controlling the outcome of my athlete, because sports are story engines. You know, like every year we see a new story about a new way that a player came up or overcame challenges, or, you know, like they're just ripe for anecdotes. And I think the holy grail is going to be when somebody can figure out a way to like create a system that isn't just about I'm this guy who does this thing, but allows you to be who you want to be. Whether that's you're Dennis Rodman and you're kind of a crazy guy who's an antagonist, or whether you're a LeBron James who just demands excellence and maybe you alienate players, but the players that really want to win get behind you. Like there's so many different types of players you could be. I would love somebody to figure out a way to like support multiple kinds of stories.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest problem I had with 2K's story is like, all right, you can choose what kind of player you're going to be. You can choose like whether you want to like respond in certain ways to like dialogue options, and you can choose like what your guy looks like. But at the end of the day, he's going to this team and then he's going to this team. He's going to be called AI for some reason.
Yeah.
And like you're going to interact with these characters, but it's like, I wish that like if I chose this one dialogue option, it would have me go a different route with this guy's career.
Yeah.
Like instead of going to play in Shanghai, I'm going to a farm team for another like an NBA squad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of when you go onto the subreddits, a lot of people are sharing their stories of like, look at the funny guy I drafted, or instead of having that be this randomly generated thing with like no actual history to it, having people share the stories of like how they got kicked out of the NBA or how they got injured and had to go to the D League but worked their way back. Like seeing a career arc play out, I think those are the kind of things that people like to share and discuss.
And that's one of the things I like most about UFC's career mode is that, you go in with just the goal of becoming the greatest of all time. And they give you, all right, here's what you need to do to accomplish that. There are like, you need to accomplish 8 of these like performance things and 2 of these like popularity goals. I forget what they're actually called, but like, so you got to like, win the title and defend it a set number of times, break the record for title defenses. You have to like compete in 2 weight classes, and just like set all these records, like, all right, set the record for most knockouts or performance of the night bonuses. And then on like the popularity side, it's like accrue this many followers on social media, sell this many pay-per-views as a headliner.
See,
and
those are check boxes though. Like I don't give a shit about.
But there are all these different ways you can like approach that. You can be like, all right, well, I want to develop my guy to be a submission guy, so I'll go for the submission milestones rather than taking on as like a striker. And you can also pick certain fights you want to go to. I mean, I'm not saying it's like the most fleshed out example of this, but yeah, and you can respond to people on social media in different ways, and based on like if you like respond to like your rival in a nice way, it might not get as many followers as if you're a jerk to them, and I think that giving you that goal and like different ways to accomplish it is a nice touch. Also, like even just how you get into the UFC, like, all right, you're going to get scouted at this fight. If you don't do well in that fight, all right, you might get asked to come on their reality TV show and like you fight in the finals for that to get into the UFC. And then like, oh, you didn't get that? All right, there's another show that's coming in. Like you have a chance to get in that way. So I like that there are multiple like methods of entry. But again, like it's not the most fleshed out example, but I think they're going in the right direction with like that particular point.
Yeah, I feel like though that the big inhibitor of this like grandiose idea is time and money, and these games rarely have either, especially EA does not invest what it takes to compete at that higher level that we see 2K do now.
Sure.
So expecting them to go above and beyond, I mean, that might be a bridge too far. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, in looking, realistically, kind of, to wrap up, looking realistically at 2019, obviously, let's put aside college football. I know everybody wants that to come back. It's not coming back for 2019, so there's that. Visual Concept is not going to jump in and get the NFL license. Okay, let's just put that aside.
NFL 2K20.
Or the NHL. There's the NHL calls now too.
Yeah. We're probably not going to see another MLB competitor come out. So there's always RBI baseball.
That is out there. A lot of the issues that we've touched on, today, we're talking about, Ultimate Team versus, career mode people. We're talking about, devs actually addressing a lot of the gameplay complaints that have been stewing for years and that people are, hot as a pistol over. We've got talking, obviously, casual versus hardcore and certainly, investing into story mode. As we're going into the last half of these, the home consoles in particular, the last half of their lives, can we really expect anything to change for 2019? I feel like we're looking at a lot of the same things we've been looking at the past couple of years, and I don't know that we could come up with all the solutions, but I feel we're heading into what I got to say. I'm kind of pessimistic about what we're looking at in terms of
innovation.
Getting the changes that I think a lot of us really want.
I think it's going to be more iterative at this point until we get the new technology, or until somebody makes that bold first step into like what the sports genre is going to evolve into, or what like a career mode is going to evolve into, or what the next step in monetization is going to be for Ultimate Team. I think that we're going to just kind of see iterative improvements. We're going to see, I think the safest bet is that 2K20 is going to do another story mode, and they're going to make some changes and they're going to make some improvements, but it's going to largely follow the same format, I think. I don't think there's going to be any mind-blowing changes to that mode, but I would love for them to surprise me. I would love to have it more choice-oriented, or something a little bit more ambitious that kind of caters to your desired play style, which I think, again, another place that does it well, to my knowledge, I didn't play it that much this year, as I said before, is MLB. I think that they kind of allow you to, or they did allow you to do your kind of player that you wanted to play as, until they introduced those archetypes that I think you and I weren't too hot on.
Yeah, well, even then, I mean, I think that there was always that weirdness where, how would your team react, organically to the kind of, the success you were having? Would they actually promote you, or were you just always going down no matter, no matter what? It always seemed a weird mishmash that it never seemed to really gel with who you were and what kind of player you were.
Yeah, I would just really like to see games become more reactive to like how you are choosing to play. If even something like NBA 2K, where like if you're a ball hog, I want to see your teammates call you on that. I don't want to see like, all right, you had a really good performance because you shot 40 times and made 13 of them. Like I want to see like your teammates approach you.
How many times did you get to the line?
Yeah, I want to see your teammates approach you and be like, man, why aren't you passing to me? I'm wide open every single time. Like I want to see like more of those. Like,
AI needs to improve significantly before you could even approach a topic like that. AI is a big deal. A lot of people play online, so it's not like always on the forefront of the developers' minds. They have to cater to PvP as well as player versus the AI, and playing with the AI. And there's a lot of quantum leaps that can be had in that department. There's no doubt.
We do have some kind of half step towards that, where like in your career, if you take a bad shot, it does dock you in like your performance for that, which
for sure
I do like that, but I would like to see that kind of take to the next level if they can figure out
There's
that.
a ton of room with that.
Yeah.
And I would love to see coaching become a bigger factor in these games, where you play for a different team and it has a different structure. You're expected to do something different, whether you're in a Popovich system or a Thibodeau system. Something like that would be really compelling to me. I don't know that, that goes to that hardcore versus casuals. Most people aren't going to engage with a system like that. How much time do you spend with it? But you see games like Red Dead Redemption 2 that a lot of those calls would be destroyed by a focus group. A lot of those decisions they made for creative reasons would be poo-pooed, and yet the game sells like gangbusters, and most people are in love with it. Like there's something to be said for just empowering creativity, as opposed to like going through these, like, is it good for everybody systems?
And Madden tried stuff with that, like different schemes.
No, they didn't though. Like it dumbed down. Like it sounds like that would be a hardcore thing, but it wasn't.
I'm saying they tried to like introduce like different feels for different coaches and everything. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of that system at all.
It just wasn't well implemented.
Yeah.
I mean,
but maybe they're going down that path at some point in the future. But like you said, it would have to require a pretty hefty investment from EA for them to do anything meaningful with that. I'm
beyond knowing what EA is doing with its investments. I got to be honest. Like my biggest question mark is who is going to be the creative director, for Madden moving forward. Did they solidify that yet? I don't think so, right? I mean, I
haven't heard anything.
I felt like it was an interim tag, and like, is it too late for that person to impact the development of this game? Probably. So, like, that's a big up in the air ball for me right now. Like, where's Madden going to be in 2-3 years?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, it just feels like with where we are in the home console life cycle, and how they're looking forward towards things and how they might start planning towards things. Again, I hate to be pessimistic, but at some point the writing, this generation is just done, and then the work is done, and then we're all going to love how the graphics are, whatever, for the next systems. But we've seen this a number of times where they don't start from where they are and they keep going. They start
strip down.
over, so like
Was it Madden 06? Where
Yeah,
it's like they have
how they're gonna,
nothing to it.
handle
NHL 15.
how they're going to handle the transition. I mean, like I said, we've seen this before, so that's going to be another thing again of the end of one generation, the beginning of the other. It puts you in a bad position a lot of times.
And before we wrap up, one game I would like to give a shout out to that we haven't touched on is Forza Horizon 4, which I thought was extremely fun.
I thought I was here for a sports talk. You guys keep talking about cars.
I tried to make it brief. I tried to make that brief.
Yeah, I did too. It was a very good game. You haven't played it. It's kind of a good in between of like arcadey and simulation. And I think it's a good game for anyone who has any passing interest in racing.
If you have a rough day and you just want somebody to like really pump you up, that game is the most giving progression system I've ever seen in my life.
Especially early on.
Dude, congratulations! You got 6th place. Here's a house and a new car. Like it is ridiculously comforting that experience. They just make you feel so good about yourself, even if you suck.
Yeah. Well, after some of the negativity I was talking about, I guess we can end on that positive note. So thanks very much for tuning in, and I hope you're still going through a lot of some of the sports games. Maybe you can play some of the ones we've talked about, and we'll have to see what next year brings. So thanks a lot.